Hello, and welcome to Strange Dominions. I am your host, Octavian Graves. Hello, listeners. It has been a long time. I apologize for the length of absence. Life has certainly gotten in the way in many ways. I'm trying really hard to keep up the schedule. Just one thing happens after another, and you got to get your priorities straight, and then you can do fun stuff. And sometimes getting your priorities straight takes longer than you expected. Tonight, though, we have a really special episode for you. This has been an episode that I've been waiting for a long time now. And I think it's one of the most relaxed I've been in an interview in a long time. We're speaking with Jason Miller. He is an author, a magician, and a teacher. The conversation tonight mainly focuses on his course, the Sorcery of Hekate. I took that about 2 years ago. Well, no, last year, 2023. So a year ago. And it is a very, very big part of my practice. I know I've talked about it here on the show before. Obviously, my relationship with Hekate goes very far back, much further back than my actual involvement in the class. But having that kind of structure has greatly improved my practice. So we talk about Hekate, we talk about all kinds of different magical and witchy, magical, esoteric topics. I'm still looking for witness interviews, people who've seen weird things, people who have heard weird things, and just general weird life experiences. So if you'd like to come on and talk about it on the show, you can contact us on our email address, which is strangedominions@podcast@gmail.com, or Instagram or Facebook or any of our other social media websites. Ian is on in this episode just for a little bit. He will be on future episodes. Just me and Jason caught up, and because I took the class and was really involved in it, there was more to go over with him specifically. So yeah, without further ado, here's my interview with Jason Miller. Tonight, we are speaking with magician, author, teacher, and very good friend of the podcast, Jason Miller. How are you doing, Jason?
I'm doing great. How are you guys?
Very good. Very happy to have you on again.
Doing well. It's nice to hear from you again. It's been a little while.
Yeah.
I know we've been trying to set this up for a while, so it's good to finally make it happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I had a great time last time I was on.
Good. I'm very glad.
So.
Thank you. So we're going to kind of do a general talk, but we're going to center it around the Sorcery of Hekate class, which I have now taken, and it has become a very, very important part of my practice. I try and do it every day. I can usually get about like a 6-month span of every day, and then I fuck up and forget, and I say, oh, I'm going to do it tomorrow. And a month goes by, and then I finally get off my ass and do the 1,000 reparations. But I'm sure you know what that's like.
I do. I have followed the same pattern many times. I'm pretty good about hitting the 100 a day to avoid the reparations. It's been a couple years now, but it has happened. And I will also say that, you know, as I started telling people in classes that like Hekate 3, like people had been doing it for more than a year, I'm like, give yourself a grace period of like a day or more. Like, let's just say that the work, the thread is strong enough to withstand the day without reparations. Or, you know, if you've been doing it for a while, maybe even 2 days. And then people are like, you know, so how long can I go? And I'm like, no, wrong attitude. Like,
yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
Like, we don't want to get too legalistic about these kinds of things, but at the same time, we don't want to let things go to pots either.
Yeah. Now, Ian didn't take the class per se, but he has been with me through enough operations and rituals that I've done with the course, not explaining any of it, of course, but just having him witness it, that he can attest to some of the things that we've experienced through doing those things out in the woods and things like that.
Nice.
Doing well. It's nice to hear from you again. It's been a little while.
I know we've been trying to.
Of course. Wonderful.
And that brings us to a really good first question. One of the things that, at one point it did irk me, but now it's just kind of a curiosity thing. Sometimes, and it's not just you, I do it too, and a lot of other people do it. When we talk about our spirits, we talk about them as if they're our next door neighbor that we're just popping over to borrow some milk from.
Yep.
And I always wanted to know, when you say Hekate said this, or she told me this, or when you speak of your communication, is it as face to face as it sounds, or what is the usual avenue for your communication with her?
No, and I try to fix this through the Q&A sometimes when people ask about the specifics of it, but you're absolutely right. I will often, for simplicity's sake, well, Hekate says yes, Hekate says no, Hekate said this, blah blah blah. And I know that other people do it too. And there's but it can come off like, this guy just like picks up the phone and dials the deity and she's there like a voice on the line, and that is not it usually. There are occasionally times where she will answer verbally, and even that will there have been times where it was audible. Like, I could definitely tell the difference between a voice in my head versus a voice in my ear. So there were times where it was like weirdly audible, but those are rare. Then there are times where it is a voice in the head that is still sounds like a voice. Those are less rare, but still rare. Other times it is the influx of a thought or an idea that comes in immediate response to something. So it can feel almost like having a conversation with yourself, yet there is this difference to it, right? Like, it has this quality that is very different than having a conversation with yourself. And there's some ways that you can test that, right? Like, if you can take that response, and then if you're wondering whether you're talking to yourself or whether it's an authentic communication, you can phrase it in the reverse. Well, maybe what she said is this. And if it's the exact opposite of what she actually said, you will know. You'll get a response. You'll get sick. Like the pit of your stomach will just be like, your body is just going, no, that's not what I said. Whereas if it's something that is just your own fantasy, it won't happen like that. But you learn to recognize things over time. And then sometimes it's a combination of things where the ideal will come, the voice will come, and there will also be signs to say, this, I will hear a phrase from her, and then suddenly there will be references over the next several days to that idea or that phrase. Dreams are another method of communication in response to invocation. So all of these can happen. Every now and then during a Q&A, I will actually say, and this is for those listening, this is very rare. The Q&As are not like me channeling material. When I say rare, I mean if it happens once a cycle, it's pretty rare. Where I'll be answering a question and I'll get this, like, that Hecate's voice is like, nope. Like, nope, you're answering it wrong, Jason. Actually, the student, should hear this instead. So it can be live and unprompted, or it can be in response to ritual. And the strength, of course, is sometimes dependent upon what the method of contact is. If it's a big ritual, like a grand rite with all the spirits in attendance and so on, then mm, when there is communication, and there isn't always communication because it's not about communicating with Hekate, but when there is communication, it comes through stronger in those moments.
I completely understand that. And I know what you mean about communication is not the goal. But I think, for me, and I'm sure there's a lot of people like this out there who don't have their spirit senses super activated or innate in the sense that, they can just tell when they're in communication with something. Having confirmation of who you're talking to and what's being said and kind of having a direct communication is very rewarding, and it's something to be sought after, and I have to try and quell that at times. And I've noticed that what she'll do for me, and I realize how I'm saying this, but there's no real way of saying it that doesn't sound crazy. I will ask her for communication after the daily ritual, and I won't get anything for a while. And then all of a sudden, I'll get a massive dogs barking right after I do the mantra. And in my mind, that's her giving me like a little treat. That's like, you've been good, you've been doing everything the right way, so here, have this. That's just how I perceive it.
Yeah, yeah. And those physical things are wonderful. Those are wonderful responses. And there is, my thinking when I was writing Consorting with Spirits, my thinking about like verification of spirit contact changed a lot when I really started to think about it. I mean, a lot of spiritual traditions have methods of verification, alleged methods of verification, right? Like you pronounce these words of exorcism, and if the spirit, the spirit can't lie when you do that. That's one of the alleged advantages of conjuration, of a forced conjuration, is that you've got this thing over a barrel, and now it can't lie to you. Other methods of divination exist, and other methods of verification exist. But I started to really think about this, and I was like, isn't it weird? Because somebody had said to me, like, well, I think that you're in contact with something, and it's something very powerful, but I don't think it's Hekate. And so, of course, I immediately went into full defense mode. Like, of course it is. And then I was just like, yeah, I don't really give a crap whether you think it is or it isn't. And, maybe the people that wrote the Chaldean oracles weren't in touch with the same Hekate that the people that wrote some of the Greek magical papyri were in touch with, and because Lord knows they're very different. But in the end, it's really who were in the, like, I always go back to that scene in Mad Men. If you've seen Mad Men, uh, yeah. So for those that haven't seen it, it's an old show, so I don't think I'm spoiling anything major. But Don Draper isn't really Don Draper; he's somebody else. His name is Dick Whitman, and he's pretending to be Don Draper. But despite that, he really is this advertising genius, right? So his real identity gets revealed. His office enemy marches him into their boss's office, reveals that he's not really Don Draper at all. He's this dude named Dick Whitman. And the boss looks and says, "So what?" like, like I assure you, this is Don Draper. Like, you are who you are in the room. In every way that matters to us, he is Don Draper. And I got to thinking about what it means to deal with spirits, and I want to know that it's the real spirit. And I started to think about, what if we treated people like this? this, right? Like I go to the local coffee shop and the owner of the shop's name is Beth and she makes a great latte. Is her name really Beth? Is she in witness protection? Maybe she isn't really Beth. Maybe people just call her Beth and her name is something else entirely. Maybe she's on the run. Maybe, like none of that matters as long as I'm getting the latte. And so we get into these, and then of course we're dealing with spiritual beings who are by definition more subtle than people. So we have this overlap of identity. Is Anubis the same as Hermes? No, they're not the same being. Yet there is also a Hermanubis who also overlaps with St. Christopher. Yet I wouldn't say St. Christopher is Hermes and is Anubis. This is simplistic thinking, and we have to be more subtle. So when we get into these kinds of ideas of verification, it gets wonky if you don't really think about what it is you want to know, right? Like, what would be the method of verification, right? How can you verify the method of verification? Okay, I've said these names of God over the demon to verify it really is that demon. But how do I know that those names of God really bind this demon? You know what I'm saying? Like, isn't it a worse situation to be in if you think the spirit can't lie and it can? Like, that would be a disaster. So perhaps it's just better to judge things based on the content, So my thinking on these things has changed a lot over the years.
No, I completely understand that. And so is mine, over the last 2 years or so when I first took the course. It was really kind of opened my mind up to a wider array of magical thought than I was used to. Because I was kind of, when I got into this stuff, I kind of came into it from I didn't start off traditional. I became really traditional because all of the modern pagans and all the modern, people who were just following neo-paganism, they really annoyed me because they felt so defeatist. I would ask them, I'd like to do with this. Oh, you can't do that. That's not how this works. Really? Because the Solomonic guy just said I could do it and he would do it with me. Well, he's lying. Oh, okay. I'm just going to go over there then. And so I kind of got locked into that thinking, kind of a reactionary way of doing it, but I got some results from it. And then doing the course and working with it as much as I have, and I have stayed pretty more consistent with it than I have really anything else. And I've gotten some very good results with it, and it has allowed me to explore some areas that a year ago I would have laughed at.
Excellent. I'm so happy to hear it. So, like, what areas? What has changed? And I have a lot of respect for traditional methods. Obviously, while I branch out from traditional methods, I definitely like to think that I'm rooted in traditional methods. I am all for progress, but also knowing where you came from.
Yeah, and the most obvious stuff is divination, because my contact with divination my whole life had been through really, really annoying people, and I associated with them essentially, and like a very specific kind of person. And so I never really did it or had any interest in it. And then I started working with tarot, and then Ian got me into the pendulum, and I've been working with that a lot and gotten pretty good with it, especially when it comes to spirit contact. And again, like, I don't know who I'm talking to, but I know that there is something on the other line when I'm using that pendulum because of how it moves, because it isn't moving in as fluid a way as it would if it was just kind of natural. There's definitely something else that's kind of working with it as well as I am.
Yeah. Yep. I know exactly what you mean.
And dreams, I was always into dreams, and I always found them to be very, very authentic methods of spirit communication. But the Hekate course has really allowed me to sort of hone in on that skill and to be able to identify when I'm having just a brain going over the day dream and when there is actually something in that dream with me talking to me. One of the ways that this happens, and it makes sense, it comes from the Hecatean sort of world, is because whenever I dream of the dead are really, really purposeful in my dreams. Like the communication is really clear. They come through very visually. They usually have something to say that it's not important, but it is. It's more of a head thing.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And I feel the same way. They're so close to, they were us. They were us.
Yeah. And so yeah, the way that I knew that this course was something was I had just lost my I had just lost my job as a security guard that I had for 3 years, and I was kind of scrambling to find something else. And I applied for a job at a veterinary hospital that I had no qualifications for, no prior experience for, no degree in anything related or anything like that. Put in the application, did a ritual using the fates, and got a call back. They asked me to come in for kind of like a shadow day. I showed up an hour and a half late in dirty clothes that I had to go to the JCPenney right next to it to buy new clothes just for the interview.
No.
Yeah, and they gave me the job completely. There's no reason I should have gotten that job.
Wow.
They weren't desperate. I know that much.
Wow. Well, hey, it worked out for you.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, and I was in the animal care industry for over a year after that.
Excellent.
Yeah. So yeah, and when that happened, that's when I really started to take it seriously and felt like there was something like going on, and there was a real engine behind this.
That there is, and I have had similar experiences like that. There's no way that I should be able to get this, but here we are. She can move those fields of probability much more than sometimes I even anticipate.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean. There was an instance where I actually used the strip of linen dream operation from Consorting with Spirits in conjunction with the Sorcery of Hekate work. And I had a dream where she was very visual and right in front of me. And she introduced me to the Graces. And she was basically like, these are the ones you need to be working with. I never ended up working with the Graces because I'm just so comfortable with the Fates. But that was a very cool dream.
Absolutely. Go. The Graces are wonderful.
Oh, yeah. I need to branch out. Me and the Fates are just really tight. And they can do pretty much everything. So
that they do.
At what point did she bring the spirits that are in the mandala to you? Was it all at once, or was it over a period of years? And what was that kind of communication like when it was bringing in a new spirit for you to work with?
Right. So from the very start, this was a mandala working. And I knew right from the start that she had this in mind. And I knew that that's part of the reason that I was chosen for it, is because I have tantric training, and most of that involves deity mandalas, right? So for those that don't know what we're talking about here, I'm not talking about a design on a ground or something like that. The easiest way to think about it is multiple groups of spirits and you, so including you, uh, all not just present, but arranged in a particular way to achieve a particular result. So much like a play, like everyone has a place to be and a thing to do during this ritual. It's not a free for all, right? It's not just calling spirits and they're going to show up and they're going to do whatever they want and they're going to be over there, and it's not like that. It's a very ordered and structured machine. And so, I had this vision in Pashupatinath where Hekate appeared in as just a woman with two torches, really, walking across the cremation grounds. Pashupatinath is where they burn bodies outside in Nepal. And so she walked across. She told me to offer a supper when I returned home. So I did months later when I was back in New Jersey. I went to the Pine Barrens. I offered her the supper and she appeared, but then immediately the four guardian spirits appeared. These are the four guardians that I speak about in protection and reversal magic. Um, and so I immediately started working with her surrounded by these four guardians, and I got to know them. And then I guess it wasn't quite a year. But I was in Philadelphia and I was sharing this tech with some friends of mine. The mantra and the image of Hekate, how she appeared with the six arms and six legs and three faces, and what she was holding and so on. And then there was a working, and that is sort of when the fates came into it and how they were arranged. And that was sort of the first thing. And then it was maybe like I just thought that was it. And then it was a year or so after that that she suggested working with another group of spirits, of three female spirits, but not in addition to the fates, in place of the fates. So this was sort of new. This is not something that's typically done in Tibetan Buddhism. Like you don't typically swap out deities for other deities, like the mandala is usually set. But she was always careful to tell me, you know, this isn't simply Tibetan Buddhist, like this isn't a Hekate Tantra. This is sorcery, and you should be aware that there will be differences. Um, and so it was about a year after that I started working with the Gorgons, and then other spirits started to come in. And that's why by the time I wrote Protection and Reversal Magic, I talk there with the Wheel of Hecate. I talk about the Fates, the Gorgons, the Graces, and the Furies. Those are the first ones that I had worked with. And I didn't start working with the rest of them or more of them for several years after that. I think the last of them started to come through the year before I got the thumbs up from her to teach it. Um, so yeah, and then of course there are other spirits that came out along the way. Not all of the eight. So there's a group of eight spirits for those that don't know. I'm talking more here than I ever have. But there's a group of eight spirits, and one of the eight appears in Protection and Reversal Magic, and a symbol for one of the eight actually appears on the cover of Protection and Reversal Magic, the first edition, even though I don't talk about it at all in the book. And basically, that, the eight were not fleshed out until, oh goodness, 2012 or so. So yeah, there's been a lot. It's been a long thing, and it like either because I'm slow or because I am meticulous, or I occasionally made mistakes and then had to backtrack. Um, I really I didn't feel comfortable teaching it to anyone until it had been about 13 years, and then I took just a couple people through it individually. And that, when you teach something, you see it through someone else's eyes, and they see things that you don't see. So it gets you to know your own material in a completely different way. Every now and then you'll hear a teacher say, my students teach me all the time. And sometimes people think, oh, this guy must not know a lot because he's his teacher, his students know as much as he does. That's not really what they mean. What they mean is that seeing the material through other people's eyes forces them to look at it through other people's eyes. And especially something spiritual or magical, teaching kind of sets things in stone. Like when I do my magic myself, I rarely do it the same way twice. Like I'd sit down, be fairly loose. I will put the spell together one way this year, and then the next year I might do it a different way, either because I feel called to or because I don't have the stuff that I had laying around last year, this that I do this year. But when I taught it to those couple people, it forced me to like codify it, right? And that brought on sort of another wave of her influence. So it really came in these big waves, right? Like there was this first wave, then quiet as I worked, and then another wave, and then quiet as I worked, and then another wave. And sometimes there were things that were more spell oriented for me and what I was going through in my life, because of course, just like everybody else, I go through ups and downs. And so this started when I was 28, and my 30s were rocky, and I went through a whole financial awakening, and had kids and all that jazz, started a business, and so some of it just had to do with that. Her hands were in the strategic sorcery course, even though it's not a Hekate course. Her hands were deeply involved in that course. But then when it came time for this her arcana, once I started teaching it, then she started to come through even more. And it's like, now I want you to talk about this. And now I want you to talk about that. And it happens even now. We are right now, this week, I am set to record the final lesson of the Wisdom of Hecate course, which is a mysticism of Hecate course. That's all exercises of exploration and experience. There's not a lot of like candles and sorcery and spirits in this one. It's all uh, wonky perception mysticism stuff that has gone incredibly well, but it took 2 years to even get the outline. And then once I started teaching it, there were delays because it was like, yeah, no, I want you to say something different. Like now, like I thought we had this nailed down. But yeah, so it takes me a while. Maybe I'm slow. I'm not the best recipient for these gifts, but I am happy that they are given to me.
Well, I imagine getting an entire arcana straight from the spirit would take time to be able to decipher all those messages. So I don't think anyone can blame you for taking 13 years to make sure that you have something that is teachable and is understandable to, how many people have taken Sorcery of Hekate since its first cohort?
Yeah, over 3,000 people. I think over 4,000. I haven't tracked it exactly, and I've moved platforms, so I'm not sure entirely. But yeah, well over 3,000 people have taken it.
Yeah, and in my opinion, it's a very, very easy to understand and cohesive course. But if, anyone listening has taken the class and been in the Q&As, then they know, and we all know, that there are people who still don't understand half of what's going on in the class.
Right. A lot of people retake. At any given cycle, about half the people that receive the emails for that cycle are taking it for a second or a third or a fourth time. And that makes me happy. That makes me incredibly happy, because they can take as long as they want and go as slow as they want. And if they're still active and engaged after years, like, what more can you ask for as a teacher, right? Like, and I should mention, the retakes are free. They're not paying over and over again. For if anyone's sitting there like, Jesus Christ, these people are plunking down $700 every time. I'm like, no, just the ones. But yeah, it's work. It's a job. It's the Q&As take time, and that's why it couldn't be a book, basically, is that it had to have this component of a back and forth with students.
Absolutely. And the Q&As are my favorite part of any of your courses. And what I enjoy about them so much is you inadvertently, in my opinion, at least this is what I got from it, there is a certain way to ask questions in your Q&As, and there's a certain way not to ask questions in your Q&As. And those rules are not laid out until you ask the wrong question.
I suppose that's true.
And it's just, at times it's terrifying, and at times it's it's the thing that lightens up my day, because you're just so funny when you're pissed off. I can't help it. It's just, and I always feel bad for the person who has invoked your wrath, but I've been there. I know what that feels like.
I really, the thing is, I shouldn't be wrathful with anyone. I mean, people have paid to be there, and if they're asking a question in good faith, it definitely, it shouldn't ever evoke my wrath. So those are whether funny or not, those are failings, which I have in abundance. Never would claim not to. And I get there sometimes though where I attack the way that a question is asked because I want to reveal the way that the thinking is, like, the entire thinking behind the question needs to go, right? Like, can I do this? I don't know. Can you? Do you have the ability to do this? Then do it. It's a question of what's going to happen if you do this, right? Like, no one is going to stop you. And if it's not breaking any kind of rule of secrecy or something that I've specified in the course, then there's no reason that I'm going to object to you doing it. But that doesn't mean it's a good idea. And it doesn't mean that it's going to be functional. So there's always ways in which people think that I want to change through the questions, right? Like, a lot of fear too, like, oh, well, I did this, and is she going to be mad? And I'm like, she's a goddess. She doesn't give a shit about you enough to be mad. I'm like, or me, or she's, if she was like this petulant loon who cursed people for missing a day of their mantra, or making a simple mistake, or even just human failings, I wouldn't teach the class, and I certainly wouldn't fare any better than anyone else does, because I'm just as flawed as anybody else. So, but I do I'm trying to be much more positive, because I do understand I have gotten a reputation as a grumpy teacher somehow, and I never used to be. So I'm trying to fix that.
Well, I also think that it has to do with, there are people who live a very safe lifestyle, and they want their magic to be a mirror of that safe lifestyle. But magic isn't safe. There's just there's no way around that. Magic comes with risks, dangers, and perils, and it requires you to go out into the world and experience the world in a very raw form. And usually in those raw forms are when the magic is most palpable. I'll give you a really good example of this. So about halfway through the course, I'm doing it every day, and I have a friend in the course, and he's saying, oh my God, every time I invoke this, I can feel this, and I can feel her, and just all the feels, as you have talked about ad nauseum. And it was getting to me. I was like, oh, wow, I don't get any of that. So I was talking with Calenda Luna from the Blackthorn School.
Yeah.
And she gave me a really good advice. She was like, well, why don't you ask for it? I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, why don't you ask for more, the ability to sense things better, and have a more visceral form of contact with her. I'm like, okay, that's a good idea. So I have a 3-way crossroads that I used to go to when I lived in Maryland, and I would do all my dip nons and special rituals there. And so I went out there on a new moon. I had the eggs, the honey, and wine and everything with me. And I did the ritual, and I asked for her to be more present and more, and I shouldn't have said this, but I said more visceral in her relationship with me. I did the mantra, and maybe 5 seconds after doing the mantra, I'm in the middle of the woods. I hear something running at me at full speed. I can't see it. It's completely dark. It's a new moon. A male buck gets about maybe 3 feet in front of me, and before actually running into me, veers off and runs up a hill.
Wow.
And that doesn't sound like, people listening like, okay, you saw a buck. It's impossible to explain how intense that experience was. I don't know how I kept it together. I did. I mean, I stayed in that spot for about 20 minutes, just kind of frozen. But that's usually how this happens for me. Like, I usually get what I ask for in the worst way possible. And it's always with animals.
Fantastic, though. And good advice on her part also. So, definitely good advice on her part. And yeah, wonderful. Man, that is a wonderful experience. I've never had a buck charge at me. I once, when I was young, I did. Oh God, it was like a Sabbath. And I mean, I was young, like 16, 17 maybe. And I think maybe I was doing like something from Scott Cunningham's Solitary Wicca book. But a deer like came out of the woods and like stood at the edge of the circle. Like, can it not see me? Like, and then, it just stared at me a little bit and then walked away. But I was like, that's weird. But man, a buck charging you, that is definitely in keeping with Hekate for sure.
Yeah, and for anyone who may not immediately understand why the deer being is significant, her Orphic hymn, one of her lines is delighting in deer, and that's one of her more minor, epiphanies but it's very big in me. Like, for some reason, that is how, whenever it comes to her and animals and her presenting herself to me through animals, it's always through deer. Never dogs. Nice. I mean, I get dog barking and stuff like that, but deer are a very consistent part of my UPG.
Excellent.
One of the other things that I had kind of not struggled with, but when you would say, and when you talk about going beyond, there was always kind of like, it was always so nebulous for me. But what I kind of came to was that going beyond looks different in everyone. There's no singular way of doing that everyone can follow. It's kind of, you just have to figure it out. And the way that manifested in my practice was I had this very strange fear of doing spells not from a book, trying to come up with it completely of my own accord. And I don't know why that was such a big block for me, but it was. And so I could not find a spell for a specific purpose. And so I made it up, and that is how I got that job. There were other operations where, if anyone has read Jeff Cohen, now Liber Chthonian has its own arcana to it. And as we know, don't try and do that with Sorcery of Hekate. Or the arcanas should
at the same time.
Yeah, but don't try and mix them.
Right. Yeah. You can't put them in a blender.
Yeah. But he has this wonderful array of incenses and oils that you can make that are all Hekate centered. And so I was like, okay, well, there's a bunch of these. Let me try one and see how that goes within the Sorcery of Hekate mandala. And the way that I did it was kind of a blend of tradition from different aspects. I basically took each ingredient and blessed it over a course of 9 nights from the middle of the full moon to the new moon. And when I put it all together and burned it, now these ingredients there was nothing hallucinogenic or psychotropic in it whatsoever. It was just a lot of frankincense, myrrh, and some essential oils. When I burned it, there was such a feeling of physical euphoria throughout the entire session, and something walking behind me, like very, very loud footsteps behind me the entire time. And then once I closed everything down, it went away. And this has been a thing throughout my entire practice, is something walking. I don't know if you've ever, like if that's something.
I have.
Okay, so then it's not just me.
And often behind me.
Yeah, I've never seen it. And I don't think I'm like supposed to.
That is almost always how Astaroth shows up for me. It starts off with her behind me, her walking behind me, her putting her hand on my shoulder. It wasn't until years later that she started to appear. But anyway, sorry, continue.
Oh, no, that was it. That was just, so what I kind of, my interpretation of going beyond, her wanting us to go beyond in my practice, is being able to do things purely off intuition and not needing a ritual, a preset ritual or a book or a recipe or anything like that. And so the going beyond thing was a hurdle for me, but I was able to kind of overcome it in my own way. And I really enjoyed that aspect of the course.
That is it, man. You know, people ask, well, if seeing Hekate and talking to Hekate is not the point of the course, as I have to repeat in almost every Q&A to people who just like they want to see her and they want to talk, and I get that, but you know, it's not the point. The point is, as I always say, it's to go beyond. It is the process of Heka, right? And that's why sometimes when people hear that haven't taken the course and they'll see the mantra Io Heka Io Ho, they'll think I'm referencing the Egyptian Heka, the word for magic. And while it's very cool that that is the word for magic in ancient Egypt, it's not related in any way that we know of to Heka in Greek, which means to go beyond. And that's the root of Hecate's name. But it is about going beyond. And then when people go, well, beyond where? Like, what is the direction that we're heading in beyond? And that's really up to the person. It's not even that she has a plan for everybody. It is up to you. It is the agency of how you take that and where you apply it. So, you know, and then obviously there are different ways, like the wisdom of Hecate. We're talking about perceptions beyond the normal. So there we're trying to move into different perceptions of probability and the nature of self and so on. But it can be something deeply mystical, or it can be something personal, like, you know, being able to personalize your spells or your craft. I mean, honestly, even if you were a cook, right? Like, or a songwriter, it's a huge jump to go from I can follow a recipe and do all the things it says, and I've gotten good at understanding why it says what it says and why these chords go together on a guitar. But it is a big jump to say, now I'm writing my own stuff. Now I'm making my own recipe. I'm not following it slavishly, and I'm not even doing substitutions. I am creating now, right? That's a big jump. So congratulations on that. Like that is a big way to go beyond. That is a very big way to go beyond.
Yeah, it was impactful for me. What is your take on this sort of Hecatean renaissance that we've been seeing in the last, I don't know, 5-10 years? Because it seems like every day there's a new Hekate course, there's a new Hekate book, there's a new Hekate something going on, and it's great, it's wonderful. I feel very blessed to be a Hecatean sorcerer in the time we are in. But I'm just curious about if you have any thoughts on it, or how you interpret all these new manifestations of her through other people.
Well, you know, it's funny. When I started the Sorcery of Hekate, I did an interview, and I can't remember who it was now, but the interviewer was in England, and he was like, you know, I think you're going to see a lot more of Hekate in the future, because she's speaking to me as well, and she's speaking to others. And she early on, she told me basically, like, I am speaking to people all over the world right now. You're not the only one. In fact, I would say that every time that I got any kind of notion that I'm like special or chosen or anything like that, slap that shit right out of me. like, no, you're not a guru, you're not a prophet. Just, do the best you can with this and put something together that will help people and that'll be good enough. But don't blow up. But so she said, like, early on, she's going to be speaking to a lot of people. And man, has that proven true. I mean, just from a pure message and business standpoint, I'm really happy that I started doing this early because I don't know. I think it might get drowned out now if it wasn't one of the first classes to where I can say, I've been doing this a while. That said, quality always rises to the top. So there's plenty of stuff out there that I don't want to talk about anything that I think is bad. I think are, and then there are things that I think are wonderful. Jack Grail has Hekate on and teaches a class on Hekate, and we've met, we've gone on hikes together and talked Hekate with one another without really like initiating each other or anything like that. But there's definitely, we know that we're speaking to the same goddess. Jeff Cullen. In fact, I have been in the room with Jeff and Jack at the same time, and all talking Hekate. So it's been wonderful, and I love Liber Chthoniya and his. I'm waiting for my Hekate statue from Jeff, and he's so bold with things like aconite and things like that I really have a lot of respect for his knowledge. Sarita Deste. I mean, her work in Hekate is earlier than I came on the scene, and liminal. When people are like, "Who is Hekate? What's the deal?" I hand them Liminal Rights, but by Sarita. That's the book to start, and the book that will help frame every other book that you read in terms of history and everything else. You're going to relate it back to that it's the best sort of cornerstone text. But yeah, Cindy Brannon, so many others and I mean, of course, there are some people now who they see, Hecate's incredibly popular. Let me throw something out there on Hekate. And that may be good and it may be bad. And then there are some people who are coming on the scene right now, even though she's at the height of her popularity, that I know are incredible practitioners and are going to rock the world with what they're still coming out with now. So my friend Giulia Turola in Italy, she has a Hekate course that is launching amidst this crowded marketplace. But it's gonna be phenomenal because she brings she's been through Sorcery of Hekate and she likes it, but she brings her own style of Italian witchcraft to it that no one can replicate but her. And she and her husband put together one of the first images of Hekate from the course. So it really is just, I mean, I think it's great. I think it's great. And like anything else, you have to kind of see what's good and what's not. And occasionally you'll get something and it's not so hot, but that's okay.
Yeah, and I think the really nice thing about the sort of renaissance that we're going through right now with Hekate is that there are so many people talking about Hekate from different perspectives and different like ways of working with her, that there is something for people who are more into the traditional Greco-Egyptian form of it and more into the modern neo-pagan Wiccan form of it. And it's nice to have that kind of diversity with one specific spirit that can be communicated with and worked with in so many different ways.
It certainly beats the old days. I came up in the 80s and 90s where it just seemed like people wanted to invoke the goddess, quote unquote. And you remember the chant, Isis Astarte Diana Hecate Demeter Kali Inanna. And it's all the same, like, I'm all a really bland goddess with no discernible qualities. And, I mean, there's a place for that, but I think magic is often served not by comparative studies, but by contrasting studies. What makes, sure, Hecate has been syncretized with Selene and with Artemis, but what makes them different, right? Like, rather than running to, well, then they must be the same, you should go the opposite way. Well, what differentiates them, and what individual details and arcana do they have that would be important in spell work? This is true even of like Greek and Roman deities. I do not find Hera to be the same as Juno. I do not feel Zeus to be the same as Jupiter. I do not feel, certainly, I do not feel Venus to be the same as Aphrodite. Yet I don't feel them to be entirely separate either. So, like, are they different? Is there an overlap? And this is where we have to kind of embrace the mess and not try to come up with these factual data points for something that we can't verify anyway.
Absolutely. I completely identify with what you're saying. My own headcanon from working with both Hekate and Selene separately is that Selene is much less willing to help defend things than Hekate is. My house it's been told to me that my house is haunted. I haven't really experienced anything, but I basically tried to not create an arcana for other spirits I was working with, but just keep up a daily thing with them. And one of my nights with Selene, I was using the pendulum and I was asking, is my house haunted? And I got a big yes. And then I said, are they, is it good spirits, bad spirits? And it was indicated basically negative. I said, okay, well, will you help? Do you have my back? And I got a huge no. But Hekate was there, and the Gorgons helped me out with, and nothing happened. It was just that was a very interesting personality shift than what I was used to.
Yeah, I can see. I've had that. I've had that. No, I'm not who you want to help with that, or I'm not going to help you with that. And that's when that happens, people should really celebrate, because if you can sense that and you can feel that, it means that you have the capacity to really communicate, because you're getting the answer that you did not want and did not expect. Whereas people that are sort of living a fantasy life, or having these communications with deities where they just show up very easily and tell them everything that they want to hear, and just basically they're confirmation bias machines. Is that really a spirit, or is that wishful thinking? That's the question to be asked.
Yeah. And it is very affirming when you get answers that you weren't expecting and certainly don't want. I'm just recalling a moment I had with Pan where I asked what was the best way to contact him, and I was using like an herbal oracle deck, and I got Amanita muscaria 4 times asking that, and it was like the one thing I don't really want to have to do Amanita muscaria to talk to you, but we'll see what else we can do here.
Something popped on and I don't know why. Hold on. Crazy. All right. Sorry. uh, yeah. 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 No, I would not. I would not either. And it's okay to say no. That is a thing. It's funny. I was just listening last night to a tantric teacher who had lived with one of my own tantric teachers, and she spent much more time with him than I did. I lived with him for about a month, and she's had much more time. Maybe not all at once, but over the course of a few years. And I she kind of went on into this position, like, these lamas, these traditional lamas, like, if they give you advice and you don't take the advice, they take that as, they're done with you now, right? Like, that you didn't follow their advice, so you must not value them, and or you're, betraying them somehow. And the same thing with spirits. Like, people will go to oracles and the oracle will give advice. And that has always been one of those things. She's not incorrect that that's how it gets treated in those traditions. But that's one of those things where when I walked away from Tibetan Buddhism, I was kind of like, yeah, just because it's traditional and the way it's done doesn't really mean it's a good idea. I've seen some really terrible advice be given, and I've seen some really terrible advice taken because it came from a lama or a spirit, and had it not work out and really, like, mess up people's lives big time. Uh, so I am always telling people, like, listen, if a spirit tells you to do something and you think it's a bad idea, don't do it. Like that, like, just tell the spirit, I'm not doing that. That's not happening. It could be an offering, it could be a piece of advice. Even if the spirit gets you something and then you don't want it, people think, oh, well, I must be, maybe I'm a traitor to the spirit because I asked for this thing and then I got it technically, but it's not really what I wanted. I'm always like, nope, it's your life, right? Like, if it was a person, if you asked somebody to help you find a job and then they found you a job, but it was a job you absolutely did not want, would you take the job? Probably not. You would thank the person for their effort and just say, it's not quite what I was hoping for, but thank you, for going out. And then maybe they'll be mad at you, maybe they won't. But if they're mad at you over that, then is that somebody you want to work with long term anyway?
Oh,
right?
yeah. That was a big lesson that I had to kind of internalize early on.
I had a similar experience. I remember I was at a voodoo ceremony, and this was at a time when I was looking for work, and I was specifically entertaining the idea of working for the state because of the benefits and all that, right? And but I wasn't qualified for much. So but I was, I was working some magic, but I was at a voodoo ceremony. I was not running it, but I was asked to drink for Maman Brigitte, right? Like, to consume alcohol in her name, which I was happy to do. And then as it happened, I got this sense that Maman Brigitte was like, what can I help you with? And I was really like, nothing, I'm good. Like, like, I don't need anything. We're set. Like, I just wanted to honor you, and I'm not here because I want to learn more voodoo or teach voodoo. I'm just here to take part and honor the Loa, and that's it. I don't want anything. She's like, no, you want something. You're looking for something. And I'm like, well, yes, I'm looking for a job. And, like, the following week, even though I did not apply, I got this call for a job with the state, for a job I didn't even apply for. Yeah, it was as a security guard at a hospital for the criminally insane.
I almost got roped into a job, that exact same job, for Johns Hopkins when COVID popped off. I was working for Johns Hopkins as a security guard, and it was in You spent enough time in Maryland, so you'll know. It was in the Columbia Satellite Hospital that they had sort of just put together. And there was a wing that they weren't using. And all of the criminally insane patient, prisoners in the Baltimore City prison had gotten COVID, and they were all being shipped to this one ward, and someone had to stay with them from 9 o'clock at night till 9 o'clock in the morning. And I quit right then and there when they asked me that, because there was no raise, there was no hazard pay, there was nothing. And so, yeah, I completely understand that position.
Yeah. So I made an offering. I was like, "Thank you," and haha, I get the joke. Like, good one, but no, I'm good. And I've I had a student. She did this working with, I can't remember the saint now, but she did this novena working with a saint for a job that was, and it was like, a good six-figure job. It was after she had quit another job so she could spend a couple years with her baby. And so she did this working. She got exactly what she asked for. And as she was being handed it, she realized she didn't want it unless she could also work from home for a total of 4 days a week instead of five, and only go into the office like once a week. And like all these parameters suddenly, that, like, as she's staring down the barrel of a 5-day office work week. And so she's like, "But I feel like I'm betraying the spirit that I asked to work for me." And I was like, "It's your life. Thank the spirit for doing its job, but it's your life." And I'm like, and why don't you just ask the same spirit to, with the modification, just say, "Hey, I didn't realize this, but I actually need more," right? Like, talk to them like a person. And she did, and they gave her everything she asked for, because they wanted her. And she didn't sort of do it because that's what the spirit said, or that's what the advice said. So yeah, if the spirit is like, do dangerous mushrooms, my advice is always nah. When the tradition is like, yes, leave the taper candle burning all day long, you can leave the room, it's fine, I'm always like, nah. That's that's a I had an uncle that was a firefighter in Jersey City, and he's like, "Do you know how many homes and apartments I've been in where the fires were started from like Botanica candles that exploded?" He's like, "A lot." It's like, it's not a small amount. It's a lot.
When I think last summer, I had started working with a Kimandara and getting really into it and enjoying it. And then one of the first offerings for one of the 7 houses of spirits was to leave a candle in the woods overnight and, walk away. Like, light the candle, walk backwards to your car and leave and come back in the morning. I said, I'm sorry, I can't do that. There's no way that I could ever leave a candle in the woods and not be freaking out every second that I'm starting a forest fire in the summer. There's just no way. And so she went back to the spirits and told them this, and then came back to me begrudgingly. I was like, "Okay, you can just do it in your room, but leave the window open or something, like, and you can sit there, but this isn't what you were supposed to do." I'm, "Okay, well, this is what I'm going to do. So sorry."
Yep. I've had a similar experience with, a spirit that wanted tobacco, and I don't ever deal with offering tobacco at all. So, excuse me. Ugh. Yeah. No, you have to have your own barriers, just like you do with people, right? I've always kind of wondered, like, why will people let themselves get bossed around by spirits in ways that they wouldn't get bossed around by people?
Exactly. It's a very, very good way of putting it. So we've been talking for over an hour, and before we go, what is new in the Jason verse? What are you working on? What can we know about what's going on in the up and coming?
The Jason verse. Yeah. So the I am launching the first overlapping cycle of Sorcery of Hecate. I don't know how it's going to work out, uh, but we have a cycle that's a little more than halfway through, and I decided, screw it, it's Halloween. The course was started 9 Halloweens ago, and so let's do this, right? Let's start an overlapping cycle, because sometimes, these Q&As can sometimes get really long. um, so I just figured, if I have overlapping cycles, it'll be more work for me, but maybe the Q&A time will be a little more manageable. I don't want to take uh, time from everybody, but at the same time, I look at something and I'm like, man, I wouldn't want to listen to 3 hours of me talking this week. Like, I just like, I don't know that people are going to want to listen to 3 hours of me doing a Q&A. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. I don't know. But we're going to try an overlapping cycle. So we've got the ninth anniversary of Sorcery of Hecate is launching on Halloween Day, on the same day that we'll be doing the Global Right. And the Global Right goes out, the Hecate Global Right goes out to anyone on the mailing list. So you just have to go to my website, strategicsorcery.net, and click to get onto the mailing list and the newsletter. And that's all there is to it, and you'll get it. Wrapping up the Wisdom of Hecate course. So that's very exciting. It's only it's only a 3-month course, 6 lessons, but it's very intense. And it's all focused on mysticism. And so that's really exciting. Once that's wrapped up, I'll launch another cycle of that. And I'm combining Hecate 2 and Hecate 3. So for those that we haven't talked about it, but apart from the 7-month Sorcery of Hecate course, which I think I'm going to add a lesson to, I am going to combine Sorcery of Hecate 2 and 3 together. I will take the most essential lessons from both and sort of just make an advanced Hecate Sorcery of Hecate course. And then other lessons that don't make that cut, they'll just be available for download. Kind of like how some lessons for the Black School are available, just you can download them like an Arcane Audio or something if you wanted to purchase it. So they'll be up on the website. So that's going to change, because I think it'll just serve the students a lot better. There's both Hecate 2 and Hecate 3 each have like dalliances into some wacky territory that's not strictly based in the mandala. And while all that stuff is fun, I think it's better if we kind of continue the mandala and beyond, and then we have all these sort of extra practices on the outside that you could do. So yeah, all that coming. There'll be a updated version of Financial Sorcery that Wiser is putting out. So that will not only have my additional commentary at the end of every chapter, but it will have an extra chapter on the 4 stages of financial wellness and a few more glyphs and, goodness in there. And I've got an Arcane Audio coming up on Marian magic. So the magic of Mary, that'll probably launch in December, around Christmas time. So a lot of stuff. I like to work. There will come a day where, I'll be too old and no one will care what I have to say anyway. So may as well get it out now, right? He's still sharp though. And what he does is so much value. I just got his latest, and him and Peterson both really profound. But it's hard to remember how long he's been around. It was a few months ago I picked up my copy of Jerry Schuler's, excuse me, no, this is just Jerry, not Betty. Gerald Schuler's Advanced Guide to Enochian Magic, right? Which is not particularly well thought of, although I have a soft spot for it. But yeah, Stephen Skinner has a blurb for it on the back, uh, a practical contribution to the Enochian studies. This manual blends Dee's material with Golden Dawn and Crowley's work. So, I mean, this is a fairly old book. I don't think it's in print anymore. And but yeah, I had no idea who Stephen Skinner was back then. So when I picked up that book, I was like, oh my God, yeah, he's been around longer than I realized.
Yeah. I think when did Techniques of High Magic come out? Like 75 or something?
Yeah. And yeah. And I still want to explore his feng shui work.
So yeah, well, awesome. I am so happy that there's so much going on with all your projects. I'm very interested in taking Wisdom of Hekate on the next go around. So you'll have to let me know when that is.
It's a mind twister.
Perfect. Awesome.
We had to so here's like a weird thing from the Wisdom of Hekate class. There's a lot of weird energy, a lot of weird perspective shifts, a lot of working with varying probabilities and things like that. I mean, it's definitely, if I was just to like tell people what's in it, it would sound like wackadoodle. But as we got going, I just told everybody, I said, listen, when I started doing this, things started to get weird, and Hekate told me to get a Shungite pyramid. And I was like, and I know this sounds like the most new age thing in the world. And I was like, but if if stuff gets weird, get yourself one, just put it in front of you when you do this work. And I think by the end of the second lesson, like by the second Q&A, people were like, definitely need the Shungite pyramid. Like my scrying mirror just broke in front of me, and like weird stuff is happening. And then another person is like, I got Shungite, but it's not a pyramid and it doesn't work. And then I replaced it with a pyramid, and everything is easier now. So definitely one of the weirdest classes that I've done. But I'm having a blast with it. I really am.
Really like when weird stuff happens with my magic. So I'm very keen on getting in on that whenever it starts up again.
Yeah. All right. Well, I look forward to it. And I will talk to you the next time you agree to have me on. Thank you so much for having me this time around.
It's my pleasure. This has been an absolute joy. Thank you for coming on and talking. That was my interview with Jason Miller. Loved talking to him as always. This is his second time on the show. Definitely going to have him back on at a later date. Really enjoyed talking to him. Felt very comfortable. Yeah, if you are interested in taking the class, it is starting up. It just started up yesterday. I'm recording this on the 1st. So it started on Halloween, but he usually lets people in within the first 2 weeks after a course has started. And I highly encourage you to look at any of his other courses, buy his books, check out his arcane audios that he does on his website. You don't have to be in a class to do those. Those are just, you buy them online and listen to him when he releases them. And they're a lot of fun if you catch them live. So as always, I'm Octavian Graves, and we'll see you again on the Strange Dominions.